Welcome to the Nonprofit Edge, a podcast series to promote purpose in practice. Each week, this webinar series features an extraordinary individual that provides valuable and impactful services, helping to transform the capabilities of their nonprofit clients. Join us as we explore a variety of topics, all vital to the success of nonprofit organizations. Learn and grow from the experience and expertise of our featured guests. Without further delay, let's introduce you to the host of the Nonprofit Edge podcast series, Chris Looney.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Nonprofit Edge. I'm your host, Chris Looney, and today's conversation centers around a truth that many nonprofit leaders know instinctively, but sometimes forget operationally, and that's fundraising is innately human in a world of automation, AI-generated content, overloaded inboxes, dashboards, metrics, and digital noise. Donors are still searching for meaning, connection, trust, and impact. And the organizations that will thrive in the future are not necessarily those with the most technology or the most sophisticated systems. They will be the organizations that remember how to make people feel seen, valued, appreciated, and connected to something larger than themselves. Our guest today is someone who has spent years helping organizations elevate stewardship, donor experience, and authentic relationship building. Lynne Wester is widely recognized as one of the leading voices in donor relations and fundraising strategy. And today we're going to explore why the human touches matter more than ever. Welcome, Lynne. We're glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here, Chris.
I am so glad that many of us got to hear you speak recently at the AFP Icon Conference. That was wonderful. And then you visited us in Los Angeles. You're just so great about giving your time to those of us that are continually trying to learn in the fundraising field. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to get our conversation started around the topic of why human connection still wins. And I know there's a growing fear in the sector that fundraising is becoming increasingly transactional and automated. Yet you've consistently advocated for a more human-centered approach. Why do you believe fundraising is fundamentally human at its core?
Well, the good news is that people give to people, right? And that giving or generosity is an innately human experience. You know, you learn to be generous from other people who are generous. I learned from my family. And I think that I want to make it clear, I believe in embracing technology. I believe in embracing automations and things like that. But at the end of the day, the act of generosity and feeling, fundraising is 90% emotional and only 10% rational. And the act of feeling is something that technology will never be able to do. It doesn't have the capability to discern the difference between two requests or have the capability to feel emotion. And emotion is what drives giving. And so I think as we embrace technology, we must also remember that it is innately a human interaction and not lose sight of that in the pursuit of better, faster, stronger.
Love it. Well, 90-10 is often a principle that we hear in another framework,
Right.
But maybe we should be recasting 90-10 to be 90% emotional, 10% rational, and most of the time the 10% is irrational anyway. So what concerns you most about the increased automation of donor engagement?
Yeah, I think, so for a long time, our fundraising habits have been built on good fundamentals. And that fundamentals, and if you do basic fundamentals, you can raise more money, you can retain more donors. And what I hear a lot in the media from technology companies that want to aid those of us to raise money for charity and to do good is let's automate those innocuous tasks, those mundane things. Let's get all of the labor off of your plate so that you can do more meaningful work. And I think, for example, gratitude is meaningful work. And I think that when we overlook the fundamentals, we lose sight of what true fundraising is, which is building a relationship with a human being and helping them, whether it's with your organization or however they want to, see their philanthropic or see their generosity potential, right? It's like matchmaking of someone's desires to see a change in the world and an organization that wants to help that change come about. But when we address things and we tend to pejoritize or look at them as just tasks on a list to be completed, I think we lose sight that those very tasks are the essence of a relationship. The saying hello in the morning, saying good night at the end of an evening. Like, I think of all the things that make up our relationships. And so what if then, so if this were to be true, then how about you have an AI agent or an automation that takes care of that for you in your friendships and your romantic relationships and your business contacts, where it does all of the meaningless small touches, and then you can focus on just closing deals and making kids or whatever it is that you've chosen with your friend or spouse or partner. But isn't that the essence? Isn't the essence the hand holding during a doctor's appointment, or the, small touch, or putting a note in someone's lunchbox? Like, to me, that's the humanness. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
That's very true. It's very clear that nonprofits have unintentionally optimized for efficiency at the expense of connection. And you mentioned some human touches like saying good morning, saying good evening. Are there other examples of these human touches that organizations underestimate today?
Sure. I think and it shows up in our retention rates. The fact that the sector's first time donor retention rate is in the 20s or 19 or fluttering beneath a quarter of donors. We're keeping way less than a quarter of our first time donors. But for-profit businesses would be out of business if they did the same. And the small touches look like sending a text, letting someone know that they saw something good happen at their org and telling someone about it. All the things that other for-profit industries are really leaning into. So I always use the example of Chewy, which is a for-profit business that sells food and prescriptions and things for pets. And their customer service is legendary. If your pet passes away, they send you a bouquet of flowers and a note. If your dog or cat says I can't keep them on this food, they say, donate that leftover food to a shelter and we'll send you the new, because they understand on your record is your pet's name. You know what I mean? Some of those details that make you feel like you're human and not just a customer. Yet we at nonprofits are still addressing emails to people that say, dear donor or dear friend. And I'm like, but I know you have the field in the database. Why? Yeah. And I think for so many years, nonprofits, and this is where tech companies have kind of preyed on our scarcity mindset, where I don't have enough time, I don't have enough resources, it's just one more thing to do. Yes, but what if we reprioritize the things to do and said that the small, meaningful touches over time actually matter more than the mass solicitations and the, getting the envelope right and things like that. And we focused and we flipped it to what happens after the donor makes a gift is just as, if not more important to what we're doing to acquire the gift.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It seems as though you put a lot of emphasis on helping organizations with their donors to make them feel, which is something more beneficial than maybe the statistics or campaigns that they market. So in your mind, how do you think differently about an organization making someone feel something versus giving them, albeit very strong statistics?
Yeah, so early in my career, I was fortunate enough to hear a great speaker named Andy Goodman at the Goodman Center. And he wrote the TV show The Nannies and The Dinosaurs. And then he came into the nonprofit space to help us tell our stories. And if I want someone to remember a statistic, I have to put it in a story. That's how people remember things. And so that emotional storytelling, I mean, I can tell you all the characters of a certain movie that move me to emotion, but I can't tell you facts or figures about a nonprofit, even though it was a compelling case, because I can tell you 80s song lyrics because I have an emotional tie to them, right? There was a story or a narrative there. And so facts they don't tell me, they just tell me information, but I don't have it in context. So I'll give you one that people use often. They're like, okay, so there's, you know, 17 million people without clean drinking water or something like that. And but I don't know, am I supposed to remember how many people there are in the world and how frequent that is? And how does that relate to me? Because I'm spoiled because I have clean drinking water anytime I want it, versus saying, here's Helen. Helen has to walk a mile and a half to a neighboring village to get water. She gets 10 gallons a day and she has to make decisions about that 10 gallons. Is she going to cook with it? Is she going to grow vegetables? Is she going to bathe with it? And your gift is making sure not that Helen has no problems in the world, but that Helen has, now that she has access to clean water, her choices aren't as difficult. That is an
Mhm.
emotional tie, and I can relate to that because everyone has to make choices in their lives. So it's not just Helen. And so, versus Helen is one of 72 million people in the world that doesn't have clean water. 1 in 8 people who don't have clean water will have a microbacterial disease 32 times in their 62 years of living. I'm lost. I'm overwhelmed, and I don't know what that means.
That's so powerful. And so this, in your mind, is really kind of what separates organizations that understand how to create emotional loyalty versus those that are just sort of simply processing donations, right?
Exactly. And emotional loyalty is built through a really simple concept, and that's thoughtfulness. So, are you a thoughtful organization and do I matter to you? I think so. I spent most of my career before going into consulting in higher education. And that's where they teach you to think. That's where critical thinking skills are born. But when it comes to advancement or fundraising at universities, I don't think they do a great job of telling people that their gifts matter. Otherwise, 89% of the money given to higher ed last year came from 2% of the donors. And when we talk to young people who are generous people about why they don't give back to their alma mater, they say they don't need me. They don't care about me as a human being once I graduate. And I don't think, and some might say, well, at scale, you know, they have thousands of donors. Yes, so do other nonprofits, and we can still be thoughtful about them to say, you know what, Chris, you matter and you're trying to make a difference. You're being a good person. And I think so many nonprofits have turned into institutions that care about reputation and brand and rankings, and you know, we have the smartest, the best, the most wonderful. Then what is my $100 going to do? I'm going to give to somebody who says, without your $100, Sally and her family don't eat this week. And
Mm.
versus well, your $100 makes us excellent, even more excellent. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're already great, but okay, fine. Or the fact that if I give $100, places don't even talk to me. I mean, I know that you do this as well, but a lot of us make test gifts to nonprofits and we never hear back again. So but I was thoughtful enough to make a gift, whatever the size. I decided to be generous that day, and
Right.
you decided that I wasn't worth it, or I hadn't earned your scalability on your thoughtfulness. And I just wonder what that means for us as an industry.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And a little bit of an interesting question. Is it more process that breaks down? Process that breaks down for the reason why organizations aren't able to follow up in the appropriate way? Or is it something larger?
I think it's both. So our infrastructure at nonprofits are so understaffed, right? When given the opportunity, nonprofits hire frontline fundraisers at a 3-to-1 rate of infrastructure staff, which is great. We need people to ask for money, but after the gift is closed, we need people to help take care of them. And so I think it's prioritization. We as an industry still have not yet prioritized retention and donor satisfaction. We are still prioritizing, but how much money did you raise? And who are your big donors? I mean, if you look at the news about philanthropy, it's you have to give $100 million and up just to make it into a newspaper in the United States, right? Like you don't even advertise a $5 million gift anymore. And so we are, to me, we are worshiping at the wrong, like kind of, we're only looking at monetary decisions and not long-term sustainable decisions. Now, do I think that's a sector-wide issue? Yes. And do I think it can be reversed? I actually do think it can be reversed and changed. I think it takes gumption, but it also just takes simple math. It's cheaper to keep the donor that you have giving by 5 to 7 times than it is to go and acquire new ones. But when I ask nonprofits, what's your acquisition budget? They proudly tell me a number. And I say, what's your retention budget? Nobody can tell me. And it's 1/10 to 100th the size of an acquisition budget, which really doesn't make any sense, because I bet if we asked Chewy or Disney or Ritz-Carlton or these brands that are known for excellent customer service, what their customer service budget is versus their sales budget, it's going to be larger.
That's for sure. So you moved us into stewardship
Mm-hmm.
so seamlessly, and I appreciate that because I know that many organizations say stewardship matters, but operationally they're prioritizing acquisition, as you say, and we know that stewardship has been undervalued, to your point about the metrics that most organizations are able to rattle off about acquisition versus retention. Um, and there's no doubt that we need to do better when it comes to stewardship internally. But I guess the big question is, what does exceptional donor stewardship actually look like internally? Where are we missing out? What are we not doing correct? What should it look like in your mind?
I think so. Instead of looking at a right or wrong perspective, let's look at this from a good, better, best. I think
Okay.
every nonprofit is, for the most part, trying to be good stewards of their donations, but I don't necessarily know that they know what it looks like. So we know from surveys at Cygnus Research by Penelope Burke and others that donors need 2 things in order to give again. They need to be thanked, and they need to be told what their money actually did at the organization. I think by and large, I would give our industry a C or a B minus at thanking. We tend to transactionalize it. We tend to combine it with the receipt. We tend to, just get it over with kind of thing rather than taking time for gratitude. When it comes to telling people what their money did, we get a D or an F. By and large, donors are not able to find out what their specific money did, and have to go looking for it. Now, I hear a lot of nonprofit professionals say to me, well, we do an annual report every year and it says everything that the nonprofit did. And so I'm going to liken this to the following scenario. So I ordered a present for my mother for Mother's Day from Goldbelly. They have great food. I like to treat her with some yummies. I ordered it. They gave me the confirmation of my order. They told me when I can expect it to ship. Great. I knew it was going to make it there on Saturday for Mother's Day on Sunday. Then when it shipped, I got notification that it shipped with the tracking number so I could obsessively track the UPS person. Then when it was going to be delivered the next day, they said, good news, your food is arriving tomorrow, right? And then after it was delivered, I received an email saying your food was delivered, everything's well. Nonprofits say, here's our annual report, go look for it. So imagine if Goldbelly or any other business you purchased something from, and my order was probably $160, $170, said, here's all the gifts we received the day you gave your gift. Go look here. Imagine if Goldbelly said, here's all the orders we received that day in the $170 range. Go find your tracking number, go find the address you sent it to, and you go find and tell us whether or not your delivery is going to be out for delivery or whatever. And here's the 37 tracking numbers, and you go find it. How is that any different than a nonprofit sending me an annual report and saying, here's all the things we did, go find your money? Now, do I think that it's actually possible and capable to tell every donor where their money did? Yeah, Charity Water's doing it, and so are many others, right? Why can't we raise the bar? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And so so I just think that the answer could be yes and. For example, if I have an annual report and I'm at an organization that serves both senior citizens, and maybe children, and the donor has made their gift to a senior citizens program, then only send me the report about the senior citizens program. At least that will get me closer. Right. But we send the whole 38-page report and expect the donor to do the hard work. And a lot like putting statistics in there and not a story. So you're expecting me to do the labor when I already did the labor. I was generous. So if I have to look for my gratitude, then I'm not going to find it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's funny. And what was going on in my mind is this journey that a dollar could take that you give to an organization from we received your money. It's now being transited to the bank. It's now from going from the bank to the program office. Oh, it's now being, utilized on the ground. And so you have that same, no one does that, right? Or maybe
No,
Charity Water does,
Charity
but
Water, a few others do that. And I'm not necessarily saying that I need that level of detail, but there's got to be a middle ground between that and here's our annual report.
right. Or here is your receipt. And here is another envelope, or here is
Correct.
another request for money already.
Correct. Which I know, and you know, because we've worked with nonprofits our entire careers, that there's no way you spent that money. You couldn't even get it through your accounting department and your accounts payable department in the time in which you asked me for money again. So again, you're not even being thoughtful about what it takes to run a nonprofit. And it doesn't, and so the disrespect in the relationship starts early on, and people say, well, Lynn, we have to hurry up and get the second gift. And I said, and therein lies the rub. Because in the rush to get the second gift, you're forgetting about the long-term sustainability of the relationship.
Hmm.
So it would be as if you bought dog food from Chewy, or I bought one Goldbelly item, and then the next week they're like, okay, here, would you like to buy a $5,000 gift card? And I'm like, whoa, what? I just got here. What are we doing? And they say, oh, well, but we need more profits, because at nonprofits we say, well, we have more need. Yes, that's true. And your need does not necessitate my speed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned
Right?
speed. Um, what thoughts do you have around speed, personalization, and this idea of authenticity in sort of donor communication?
I think, I think it is, it's a double-edged sword when it comes to speed and authenticity. So speed indicates to a donor that our nonprofit is well run. If I can get a communication out, and there's that expectation. Look, it's 2026. We live in a global, what I would call flat experience economy, meaning if I can hear from someone in New Zealand in the same day, when I've purchased something from a business in New Zealand, why can I not hear from a nonprofit that's like 2.5 miles down the road from my home? So speed means I have a well-run business. Personalization means, and I care about the human being at the other end of the gift, and I haven't institutionalized this. Personalization in 2026 is no longer a nice feature. I'm like, to me, it's the baseline, but I still receive tons of communications that don't even have my name in them. And I'm like, but every single email system that is out there can do that in 20. It's no longer a factor of whether you're tech or did I buy the package. It comes default. Like it's more work for you to not personalize it sometimes. Do you know what I mean? It's like getting a car without windows that go down at a button. You would have to pay extra to get crank down windows, right? But we're over here cranking down windows when there's a little button. All you have to do is hit it and the window goes down. And so for me, it's a flawed mindset of understanding the priority. Maybe we do fewer communications that are more personalized rather than trying to, the average nonprofit is sending 60 communications a year to a donor. And a donor is giving to between 4 and 6 nonprofits a year. So that's 240, 260 different communications I'm receiving in my inbox. Maybe I don't need that many. Maybe I just need a few really good ones. Things that stop me in my tracks, things that make it difficult for me to delete it from my inbox, something that's sticky and meaningful and addressed to me rather than your monthly newsletter, which is all about you. And I have to read the whole darn thing, which is its own, exercise in 9 minutes of futility trying to read those things.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I was interested in understanding if there are other ways that you've seen meaningful donor experiences, especially for organizations that don't have large budgets, or just ways that organizations are productively and effectively demonstrating real gratitude.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing that all of us overlook sometimes is the role of our volunteers. So I hear all the time about boards. I do a lot of board training. Boards need to give, board. And I say, boards need to make the environment possible for giving to happen. So guess what I want my board to do? A, I want them to make a gift. Otherwise, they shouldn't be on my board. And then number two, they can write thank yous. They can text thank yous. They can call thank yous. And so what about getting other people involved in the donor experience? Again, I think sometimes we think it has to be some massive creation and properly branded this, or it could just be a text from Lynne to Chris saying, hey, we were thinking about you. You made your 14th year in a row of giving, Chris, and I'm humbled by that. Like that is not a heavy lift on a volunteer. And it's actually it has a beginning, middle, and an end. As a volunteer, I have a task, I can complete it, and I can feel satisfied by it. It also gives me a lens into the kind of work that we do as fundraisers. I think a lot of board members, unless they're really, really in tune, don't even know what I do as a fundraiser. They think a lot of people think we have dinner with rich people. And I'm like, no, not a lot of that. Do you know what I mean? And so, but instead I do a lot of touch point and thoughtful things. So as a nonprofit, what I have to do though, is I have to prioritize. I hear, and I'm sure you hear this, we want a culture of philanthropy. And I'm like, well, I just want people to be grateful. Can we start there? Can we start there with a culture of gratitude? And if I have that, then a culture of philanthropy will come.
Makes sense to me. I absolutely believe that a precursor, I think, to your point of a culture of philanthropy is a real culture, authentic culture of gratitude. So that is a point that I think everybody should take and let that sink in deeply as they think about their own stewardship efforts and acknowledgement and gratitude efforts in their organizations. I wanted to jump in to technology. We know it's not going away. We
Nope.
know AI
I don't
isn't
want it to
going
go
away.
away, right?
Yeah,
I don't.
there are things that I absolutely love about technology and can't believe how my life would be different if I had access to some of these things as a kid, right?
Right.
Jealous of my children, my 3 children, who just have no idea how much easier life is than when we grew up in many ways, and harder in many ways. So I'm not stupid about that. But the point is that I don't know the best way for organizations to use these tools without losing humanity. Just as our kids and we are spending more time glued to our phones, glued to our screens, and less time maybe, dare I say, at the bar or at the club or at the park or at the just hanging out and being
Right.
with
Living
people
your
and
life.
living life. Yeah, living.
Mhm.
Well, in a different way, in a in 18th, 19th, 20th century way, I guess. But so the question is, how should nonprofit leaders be thinking about AI and automation in fundraising, i- in that we don't want to lose humanity?
I think that AI is going to be one of the largest sea changes we'll see. And I am technology forward. I think that there are so many uses and ways in which technology can help us scale our nonprofit work, with the understanding that we're in an innately human business. So I love the fact that AI and technology could help us data synthesize. It can help us automate tasks like summarizing board notes, right? Like, how many of us have spent hours typing up board notes or meeting minutes? And AI can do that. I look at AI not and technology not as artificial intelligence, but as assistive intelligence. It's there to help make the human brain better, not to replace it. And so I think we have to go in with the same ethics and core values as to technology as we treat everything else. And we have to look at it through our lens, not from a lens of fear, but a lens of, and how can I use this to help my nonprofit? And how can I use this to help myself? Now, when it comes to automations, technology can help us surface data that human beings might overlook. I will tell you, loyal donors is a place where technology could surface loyal donors for us because they, quote unquote, don't give enough dollar amount wise, right? In order to pull up on our reports or things like that. But technology is only as good as the thoughtfulness and the priorities we put in place. Like, I've already seen a lot of AI. I believe that AI shouldn't be writing our fundraising communications, because in the time in which it takes to get a good one, I could have written the communication myself. And I'm seeing a lot of sameness and AI. What we need is technology companies and the brains behind them to come alongside and say, wow, Chris, you're doing all this manually. And in this time that you're doing this manually, a computer could do this. I think about Excel and formulas, right? Like, oh, we can take this, or pivot tables. That is all technology. I remember in Word, we had a little guy that bounced up and down called Clippy, and he helped us write, just like Grammarly does. And at the same time, I never hated Excel because it was trying to replace me. I think because I looked at Excel as a tool I was using. So, how do we also have mindfulness around the tools that we use? And also say there are things that we can use tools for. So, I have a ton of fundraisers out there trying to chop down a forest, and they are using an axe, and they get tired, and the axe gets dull, and the work gets harder, and they get burnt out, and they say, I don't want to chop down trees anymore. And sitting right next to them is a chainsaw. But there's this lens that chainsaws are the enemy. Chainsaws aren't the enemy. Technology isn't the enemy. It can be used as a tool, but I have to learn that I have to use the chainsaw responsibly, and that it also needs to be sharpened, and that it can really hurt me if I just take a chainsaw and use it carelessly, right? Just like an axe can, but even more damage. So how do I ground myself in, here are the things that no matter what, no matter how big we get, every donor should feel that they matter. And here are the ways in which I'm going to do that as a nonprofit. And I'm not abandoning that. I will tell you that one of our core values at my company is integrity. We do not use AI to do client projects because the client is paying us to do the labor, us human beings to do the labor. But I use AI to write learning outcomes for session descriptions for conferences, and I use it to analyze and anonymize data, and I use it, do you know what I mean, to do all kinds of things, to connect a webinar registration to my email list and things like that. But I'm also being paid for a service. And so I need to have integrity about that. And I think nonprofits need to look at the lens and say, what will donors care about and what won't they care about when it comes to integrity?
Yeah, that's wonderful. That integrity issue is so important. And as we think about these organizations that have figured out how to use chainsaws instead of axes, what are those warning signs, though, that these organizations might be becoming too automated?
Well, I think there's a big warning sign about donor retention. I mean, I think that is the that is the warning sign that's been given to us for years that we have ignored. I think a second warning sign is when donors say to us, well, what's the difference between you and someone else, right? So what's the difference between your organization? We are already losing trust in the nonprofit. I'm sure you've seen the study where trust in the nonprofit sector has gone down in the past 3 to 5 years. Why are we losing trust? What is it that is causing people to lose trust with us? And I think it's because in pursuit of scalability and more to also garner that, and donors are saying, well, you have more need and you constantly are talking and I'm getting tons of messages, but where's the soul of those messages? And so, if you're receiving things that makes you uncomfortable, I think part of the opportunity / challenge we have is to actually speak up and have conversations and make decisions about it. And same thing when we're talking about things like, well, for $100, a donor gets a receipt. Or we don't accept gifts less than $20. I've seen that on giving pages for websites. And I'm like, but what if all they have is $10?
Yeah.
So that act of generosity isn't good enough for you?
Strange. Yeah, strange.
It's really strange behavior that we are making decisions for people about how they will be generous.
Right. Especially in this environment where there's a lot of testing going on, as you mentioned, sometimes not intentional, but before I make larger gifts, I just want to see if this is an organization I even like or can sort of get behind as I begin to understand them more and invest in them more. I mean, I would expect the same behavior for some investor that's trying to determine if this is where they want to park a lot of money of theirs. Is it going to generate the kind of impact and returns that I want out of my investment? Is it either safe or is it, really making a huge impact? And so is this organization in that same space to provide me with a sense of security or a sense of impact or value? So I hate the idea that you would somehow put a minimum threshold on your giving to a donor.
Yeah, I mean, I think that businesses, and 70% of first-time donors are test gifts. They're nowhere near the person's capacity. But just like going into a store for the first time, you're not going to spend your entire month's budget if you don't know how you're going to be treated as a human, and that loyalty and that is earned. And I have a friend who his job is helping ultra high net worth people, help them give their money away. So he works with them as families and helps them find their values. And then he goes to the organization to see if they even run well as an organization, if they can accept a gift that big, like what would be the ramifications of a large gift? Because some nonprofits, it's like some nonprofits have received McKinsey Scott money and it hasn't worked out because they don't know what to do with the money and they don't have a plan. And he said it's shocking because he always makes a small gift of $100 to $250 before he even meets with them on behalf of the family, because they act very differently with him as a representative of this high net worth family, right? Versus they do when he just makes $100 gift online.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
That
exactly.
shouldn't be the case.
Right, right. Shouldn't be the case at all. What's the role of emotional intelligence,
Mm.
sort of in the future of fundraising leadership? How do you see emotional intelligence in the context of stewardship, in the context of technology?
This is really interesting because if we think about technology, technology is the very void of emotion. Like, technology doesn't cry, it doesn't laugh, it doesn't laugh through tears. That's my favorite emotion. And so it's imperative on leadership to remember that giving, the actual act of being generous, is an emotional act, and that it comes with it feelings, and that the more we get an arm's length away from it, the more we institutionalize it, the further we transactionalize that emotional activity. And so I think it's an opportunity for leaders to remember that giving money away is actually a joyful act. It raises the serotonin in the body, the dopamine, all of those neuroscience chemicals that Adrian Sargent and all the other really smart people talk about that I am not as well versed in, the psychology of giving. Giving feels good and it's actually good for you. And so my first ever job in fundraising was at Rollins College, a small college in Winter Park, Florida. And Cynthia Wood was my vice president, Aaron Hodge was my director, and we had fun. We had a great time working in fundraising. And that was something that as I moved up in fundraising, as I work with clients, they always say to me, well, I always laugh in meetings with you, or when I go to your sessions, you always make me giggle. And I'm like, this profession should be joyful. Where did we learn one day that it's not okay to laugh and smile and have joy from this? Because let me tell you, the donors that are giving to us, for the by and large, are joyful people, and they enjoy giving money away. So maybe yes, I want it to be a profession. Yes, I have a master's degree in it. Yes, I take it seriously and everything like that. But we're not saving lives. We're saving PDFs over here in fundraising. You know what I mean? And we might as well have a good darn time doing it. So I guess I would remind leaders that one of the reasons why people are not sticking with fundraising as a profession is we've sucked all the joy out of it. And so, how can we put joy back into our work? Because I fully believe that the donors feel it as well. I totally believe that the donors can feel like, do your communications, you do your emails bring donors joy? Does your monthly newsletter bring you joy when you write it? Or is it just something you're checking off because it was due that week?
Right. Yeah. Great questions. Great questions. What about the younger generations? It seems like such a mystery to people about what to do, how to respond, what are they looking for, and maybe it's more simple than that. And of course, younger generations become older generations. I once remember when I was a
Same.
younger generation was looked at with confusion by older generations, and now I'm the older generation, I think,
Yeah. I remember
almost.
when I was a graduate of the last decade, and I was like, you can't convince me that the 90s wasn't 10 years ago, if you know what I mean. And
Right,
so
right, right.
um
1986 could not have been that long
nope,
ago.
nope, it wasn't. And I refuse to believe it because I still have
That's
every
right.
song lyric memorized. But
Well,
here
and they're still playing the songs from that, era today on the
my
radio. So
my acid wash jeans are back in fashion. Apparently, I should have held on to them.
big
Um,
hair is coming back.
oh God, I hope not. I will say the younger generations give me a lot of hope.
Good.
They are generous beyond measure, but they are generous in different ways. They show up by volunteering first, versus our generations were taught to give first and then volunteer, right? So they're showing up with I think it's the most precious thing you have, which is your time. But then younger generations are more discerning. They really, and I'm not talking about silly things like overhead. I'm talking about, is your organization run by good people and do you do good things? Do you have core values? Are you an institution or are you a cause? Is it something that I can rally my friends to give behind? And also, I'm 27. Do you take me seriously? Or do you think I'm just a kid who doesn't have capacity or doesn't have money or doesn't have resources? Are you, a simple one that happened on LinkedIn the other day? A friend of mine said, "Oh, there goes my alma mater again, sending me mail to my husband, even though we both graduated from the same university, and they address everything to Mr. and Mrs. Chris Looney, and I am not his property, and I don't know why they haven't figured that out, but they're not going to get a dime from me until they can call me by my name, and I don't need the Mr. and Mrs." So like, there's nothing wrong with them having standards and holding us to those standards. And I think we're missing that because we're busy still like hanging plaques on walls, and they're like, I don't desire that. I just want to know I made a difference. And so I'm hoping that we listen to them, because they're also the same folks that are now majoring in fundraising and philanthropy. They're saying this is a career choice. I want to work in the nonprofit sector, versus our generations. Because let's be honest, most of us fell into it, right? Most of us fell into it. Not everybody had a legend of a mom who was in fundraising and knew it was a career, right? So I didn't, and a lot of us didn't know. So I think they're choosing this life. They're absolutely choosing this life, and they say, I want to do something that matters, and they show up time and time again, but we tend to look beyond them, over their heads, and not in a great way.
Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of work our way toward the end of our conversation today, I wanted to turn it into a practical focus. You've already offered so much practical advice that it feels actually disingenuous to say, let's now turn it into something practical. Everything was practical. Now let's maybe narrow the focus to nonprofit leaders that are, for the most part, our audience of listeners who are trying to do their leadership roles better, both in fundraising and in just the nonprofit management space. So I guess the question is, what advice would you give to those executive directors, those CEOs, in terms of how to model donor-centered behavior?
It's so interesting you asked that, because I actually think the best thing that a leader can do to translate this to donors is by doing it internally at their organization. I'm looking for a leader who gives kudos, who writes notes or sends texts to people when they go above and beyond. And I'm talking about your staff, right? Like, do you have a good internal stewardship and internal culture as a leader? I'll never forget. Again, like I said, I had a great first leader. And when I made a mistake, she said, Lynn, we've made a mistake. We, not you, we. And I was like, oh dear. Okay, let's work on it together. And when I did good things, I got notes or just moments of, hey, thank you so much for that. Not the blanket email that went to everyone after the event to say, we did it, the real personal, meaningful. So I think stewardship and good donor relations behavior starts early and often with leadership. I think the other thing that it does is it's me modeling that behavior to donors, so that when someone comes to you with a stack of thank yous to sign for donors, that be the first thing you do. My friend Matthew Lambert at William and Mary, I was talking with his team the other day, and they said it's the first thing he does every day, and he turns it around before he, basically opens his emails. And so how are you prioritizing gratitude and stewardship? And frankly, how are you budgeting and resourcing it for it? As a leader, have you said, you know what, we might be on tough economic times, so I'm going to take 10% of the acquisition budget and move it to retention, versus I'm going to cut a donor relations or stewardship budget and move it to acquisition. People pick up on those cues, as a
Right.
leader. And so I think it starts within as well. Little things. I mean, the tiniest thing, but your team is picking up on how grace filled and how gratitude filled you are as a leader. And can you say simple things like thank you to the person that sets up the tables in your meeting room, or, all of those little things to me set a larger culture of, because it is a buyer's market when it comes to employees right now, and people have a choice where they work. And I would much rather work for someone who's demanding and exacting, but gives gratitude, than someone who's like, do whatever, but I never hear anything like thank you from them to anyone at the organization.
Yeah, that's great. I like that framing, being exacting but grateful. Yeah, I mean, because I don't think that you have to be one or the other. I think you can be
No.
both and. So two final questions, and one of them is for those younger emerging fundraisers that are entering the profession today or in their first few kind of assignments as they're beginning to understand and develop skill in the fundraising field. What advice would you give them on this kind of topic?
If I walked in the door to fundraising as a fundraising position at a nonprofit and I was immediately assigned donors, for example, like I was carrying a portfolio, the first thing I would do is reach out to every single one of those donors with an expression of gratitude in the channel in which they gave their last gift. So if they wrote a check, I would write them a note. If they, gave online, I would send them an email or a text, because what I hear from fundraisers, especially those first starting out, I can't get a meeting. And I'm like, you can't get a meeting because they don't know why they should meet with you, and they don't, what's in it for them. And the email you write is usually, hi, I'm coming to your area and I want to give you updates about what we're doing. I don't want to take my time to do that. Or, Chris, I get a lot of requests and I give every person who requests from me 30 minutes of my time. It's something I do. That's my Mondays and Fridays. But I hear, I want to pick your brain. Okay, but what's in it for me as the person whose brain is being picked? How about let's
Yeah.
have a conversation about your views on recognition? It can't just be, Adam Grant has a great book, Give and Take. Don't be a taker. Be a giver. Walk in the door and ask people what you can do to help them. Pitch in and volunteer at your next 3 events, even though that may not be in your portfolio. Like, walk in the door with some humility. And one thing I would encourage, and I know this might be a little bit against what the culture is right now, but it makes me feel older, but a lot of young people are very healthy with their boundaries, which is interesting. They're like, no, I'm not doing that, or that's not my job, or that's not during working hours. Can you find a happy medium? Because in nonprofit work, the way I got ahead was taking on extra stuff that wasn't my job. And I'm not saying to do that to the point of burnout, but could there be a little more give in your boundaries? Because at nonprofit land, I've seen a president of a university pick up a table and move it when it needed to be moved in an event, because that's what we do. We pick up the
Right.
tables and chairs and we make it happen. So when you said, well, I'm not going to do that, that's not in my job description, you immediately put the other person on the defensive. And sometimes there's got to be a meet in the middle.
Yeah, good, good. No, it's great advice. Very practical. And kind of last question um, is this. If listeners only remember one thing from today's conversation about fundraising and human connection, what do you hope it is?
That technology will help us scale fundraising, but gratitude scales humanity.
Wow.
And it is, giving gratitude is such a simple act. It is not a heavy lift. It's the least we can do for people.
It's terrific. What a powerful reminder that while tools and platforms and technology will continue to evolve, people fundamentally still want to feel known, valued, appreciated, and connected, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Fundraising has never simply been about money. It's about belief, trust, partnership, and shared purpose. The organizations that remember that truth and operationalize it consistently, we'll build stronger missions and stronger communities for years to come. Lynne, thank you so much for joining us today on the Nonprofit Edge podcast. You are such an expert and communicate so clearly about what organizations should, can, and need to do to embrace the future in a lot of ways, but especially as it relates to technology and stewardship and grabbing donors and never letting them go. And so if you have enjoyed today's conversation out there, listeners, I would encourage you to like and subscribe to the Nonprofit Edge. We have two other podcasts, Mastering Fundraising and Lead for Good. All of them are about interviewing the experts that exist in our sector and really trying to grow our own knowledge and capabilities in this ever-changing field. So I'm just grateful for all of you that are out there listening, and a reminder to you all to just continue to lead for good in all you do. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for the Nonprofit Edge, a podcast series to promote purpose in practice. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation and learned some important lessons from our featured expert. We always want our content to be informative and to position nonprofit leaders to succeed. Please join us again for our next podcast. In the meantime, we wish you all the best and encourage you to learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership by visiting our website at www.fulcrumleader.com.